Let's talk about Chapter 2, Supply and Demand. In this video, we are just to review some of the basic concepts you should have learned in introductory macroeconomics. And we will go fairly fast to just refresh your memory. The first concept is the demand curve. You may remember the demand curve is downward sloping. Okay, what it says is basically if the price goes lower, the quantity demanded will be higher. And at this very high price of $4 per pound for avocados, the quantity demanded is zero on the horizontal axis. And then as the price going down, right, from $4 to $3, the quantity demanded becomes 40. That's 40 million pounds. And if the price is $2, the quantity demanded is 80 million pounds. And of course, if the price falls to zero, then the quantity demanded is 106 million pounds per month for avocados. Again, the basic idea is that this demand curve, or basically the demand, is downward sloping. If you charge higher price, people would like to buy less. If you charge a lower price, people would like to buy more. And what we have talked about is the price movement and price and quantity movement along a demand curve. The demand curve can also shift. Okay, the whole demand can shift. That's a different position. In our textbook, if the price of a substitute like tomatoes change, and that can move the whole demand curve. Or if consumers' income level change, that can also move the whole demand curve. The key point to remember is that if there's only price or quantity changes, right? If only those two things change, then we are moving along a demand curve. But if it is something else, something not on the axis, not on the vertical axis, the price, nor on the horizontal axis, the quantity, right? If anything out of this picture, but related, has changed, then the whole curve, either supply or demand that we are talking about, okay, the whole curve will change its position. Here, we are talking about the price of tomatoes went up, and then because avocados kind of substitute for tomatoes, right? But tomatoes become more expensive. Consumers can only buy less, and they use avocados to substitute tomatoes. So they demand more of avocados. And when they demand more, the demand curve shifts to the right. So we can say the demand curve shift to the right or shift outward. That means an increase in demand. When we say an increase in demand, we mean the demand curve have moved to the right, right? If say price has declined, we say the quantity demanded has increased. Okay, there's this difference to remember. Should not be too hard if you learned it well in your introductory microeconomics. Okay, let's look at a linear demand function. This is fairly important for our future lectures. Okay, so we have an intercept. Intercept is actually on the horizontal axis for this demand function because we put quantity on the horizontal axis. So the intercept is 160 on the horizontal axis, and the slope, right, is this minus 40. Slope is the coefficient on the price. And If the price change, the delta P here, is negative 50 cents, right? The price dropped by 50 cents, then the quantity increased by 20 million pounds. This is the delta Q. And that change comes from this negative 40 coefficient. So that's a linear demand curve, right? You plug in a value for the price, you will be able to find a quantity demanded from this demand curve. Or if you need, you have a quantity demanded, you can calculate what is the price from this demand curve. Okay, and there's another concept of the so-called market demand curve. The market demand curve is basically the summation of all individual demand in the market, right? We can consider the demand for each individual. Here we have Catherine and Nicholas. This is their demand for ice cream cones. And at $2, Catherine demand 4 cones, and at $2 price, right? Nicholas wants 3. Together, at a $2 per cone price, their total demand is 7. And then at $1, right, Catherine demand 8 cones, and at $1 price, Nicholas demand 5, and together they demand 13 in the market. Okay, so in that way, what we are doing is summing up the quantity demanded, right, 4 and 3 at each price, right, at this $2 to get 7 cones quantity demanded, and at $1 we sum up 8 and 5 to get 13. So this is the total quantity demanded at different prices. And what we are doing is to sum up the individual demand curves horizontally, right? From this blue line, this red line, we get this purple line, right? This purple line is the market demand. That's how we get the market demand curve. We have talked about the demand curve, and the demand curve is downward sloping. For supply curve, right, in the market we have demand and supply, and the supply curve is upward sloping. What it says is basically as the price goes up, the quantity supplied tends to be higher. This may not be true for every single market, but in general, when we talk about the supply and the demand, we tend to think at higher prices, the quantity supplied will be higher. In this picture, what we are looking at is at $2 per pound for avocados, there will be 80 million pounds supplied to the market. And if the price increased by $1 to $3 per pound, there will be 95 million pounds avocados supplied into the market per month. So this is the upward sloping supply curve. The supply curve can also move. In our textbook, basically we have a cost increased, a cost of fertilizer increased, and the supply curve shifted back or shift to the left or shift toward the origin, right? Shift inward. That's how we describe decrease in supply. This is the whole curve movement. Again, the whole curve movement is coming out some factors not inside this picture, not on this picture. On this picture, there's only quantity supplied and the price, right? If something else, right, something else changed, maybe weather, maybe fertilizer, maybe the technology, maybe the labor in the field, right? Those factors change that will move the supply curve. Okay, in this case, it's a cost increase, so the supply decreased, and the supply shifted to the left. That's the movement of the supply curve. Okay, it's not a movement along the supply curve. If it's along the supply curve, it will be a price quantity combination change. Here, it's basically for every price, the quantity supplied is lower. And for every quantity supplied, you have to offer higher price. Okay, for every quantity supplied, you have to offer higher price to maintain that level of quantity supplied. That's a shift of the whole supply curve. Okay, there's also the idea of summing up the individual supply curves horizontally, right? This blue line and this red line to get the market supply curve, right? At $2 price, we have Cold Rock offer 80 cones per day, okay? And at this same price, $2, frozen candy offer 50 cones. So together in the market, they offer 130. Right? That's the quantity supplied at $2. At $1 price, from Cold Rock, we have 40. From frozen candy, we have 30. And so for the market, right, at $1, the total quantity supplied is 70. And that's how we get the market supply curve. Once we have the supply and the demand, right, here we put the avocado supply curve and the avocado demand curve in the same picture, right? For every price, there's a quantity demanded on the demand curve, and there's a quantity supplied on the supply curve. If the quantity demanded equal to quantity supplied, we have the so-called market equilibrium. And in this picture, we have the market equilibrium price at $2, and at that price, right, the quantity supplied equal to quantity demanded is 80 million pounds per month. Okay, that's the market equilibrium. Nobody want to buy more at this price. Nobody want to sell more or less at this price. Nobody want to buy more or less at this price. At this price, the market is in equilibrium. Nobody would like to change their behavior, either buy or sell more or less. Right? Everybody satisfied. Everybody who would like to pay $2 per pound, they got the quantity they wanted, right? And every firm who's selling avocados who would like to receive $2 per pound, they can sell the quantity they would like to sell. That's the market equilibrium. And in this class, we definitely need to have some basic calculations. Here we have the demand curve equation, quantity demanded equal to 160 minus 40 times P, and the supply equation, quantity supplied equal to 50 plus 15 times P. Basically, we have two curves, and the two curves have, each of them have two variables. One is quantity, the other is price, right? Here we have a demand and a supply. What that's saying is basically you have two equations and two unknowns. We want to find the equilibrium point in the market. We want to find a price such that the quantity supplied equal to quantity demanded. And that's exactly how we solve this two equation and two unknown system. Obviously the easy thing to do is to equate the quantities up, and then we can solve for price. So 160 minus 40p equal to 50 plus 15p. And what we are doing here is we move this 40p to the right side of this equation. It becomes 40 plus 15 is 55p equal to what? We will move this 50 onto the left-hand side of this equation. Basically, you can imagine we deduct 50 from both sides. So 50 is gone here, and deduct 50 from 160, you got 110. And then we got a price equal to 2. So that will be our equilibrium price. And then you can plug this equilibrium price back into either the demand or the supply. If you use the demand curve, 2 times 40, 160 minus 2 times 40, 2 times 40 is 80. So you will get quantity demanded will be 80. Here, if you use 2 times 15, that will be 30. 30 plus 50, you got 80. So either way, you can get the equilibrium quantity equal to 80. So that's how we solve the market equilibrium using the demand equation and the supply equation. If the market is out of equilibrium, if the price fall below the equilibrium price, what we will find is that there are some people in the market who want to change their behavior. At $1.60, what we find is the quantity demanded is 96 million pounds. There are some people want to buy more than what is supplied in the market. What is supplied in the market? It's 74 million pounds. Okay, so there's basically people find the shelf of avocados in the supermarkets empty, right? They cannot find enough supply, just because quantity demanded exceed the quantity supplied. In that situation, we call there's a excess demand of 22 million pounds in this market. And what people will do, they will compete to buy avocados at this ultra low price, and perhaps they will offer higher price, right? They want to get the avocado as long as it's still below $2, and they still see the avocados in the supermarket gone pretty fast. And the supplier also learned, all right, we can sell our avocados at a higher price and the people still want it. So the buy side offer higher price to buy, the sell side, right? They charge more and they sell more. And this kind of behavior from both the supply side and the demand side will bring the price up to $2 and the quantity supplied increase from 74 to 80. Quantity demanded decrease from 96 to 80. And now market is back in equilibrium again. If, on the other hand, the market price is above the equilibrium level at $2.40, quantity supplied is 86, quantity demanded is only 64. There's again an excess supply of 22 million pounds per month. And this is basically the firms find that they cannot sell all of their avocados they put on the shelves in the supermarkets, right? And they each time the consumers go to the supermarket and just see a lot of nearly rotten avocados on the shelves, and they see this price is still $2.40. It's still too high. They don't want to buy that many. And what the firms need to do is basically lower the price, mark down the price towards $2. And once the consumers see avocados become cheaper, they would like to buy more. And again, both of the two sides make move, right? They change their behavior, and which basically drive down the price towards $2. And as the price going down, the quantity supplied also going down, right? The firms make less money per unit, and they supply less quantity to the marketplace, and the quantity demanded increase because the price declined. Avocados become cheaper, and people buy more. And then at $2, again, the market is back into equilibrium. The quantity supplied equal to quantity demanded. Nobody want to change their behavior anymore. Now let's look at the so-called shocks to the equilibrium. Basically, what we have is a change in the demand, or say a shift of the whole demand curve, or a change in supply, right? The shift in the whole supply curve. Here, if the demand increase. That will basically drive up the price and the quantity at the same time, assuming the supply stay the same, right? The supply is still where it was, and then you have an increase in the demand. The position of the demand curve change from D1 to D2, and the equilibrium change from E1 to E2. The price increase by 20 cents. The quantity, the equilibrium quantity increased by 3 million pounds. So that's the increase in demand, right? And to understand this result, what we have is actually the equilibrium point move along the supply curve. Because the supply curve is upward sloping, right? When it's move along the supply curve, you can have either increase in demand or decrease in demand. What you will have is basically the equilibrium price change in the same direction as the equilibrium quantity. So if you have increase in demand like what we have in the picture, right, the price will increase, the equilibrium price will increase. So is the equilibrium quantity. If on the other hand, if the demand decrease, right, the whole demand curve shift to the left, you will have the equilibrium price decrease and the equilibrium quantity decrease as well. Now let's look at the supply change, right? The supply in this picture shift to the left, shift inward. It means a decrease in the supply. And then what's the result? Price is higher again, but the quantity decreased, right? The equilibrium quantity decreased from 80 to 72. Now what happened? This is a movement along the demand curve, right? The supply curve shift and the demand curve stay the same. The equilibrium point moving along the demand curve. And what we have is basically when the equilibrium move along the demand curve, the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity move in opposite direction. Right? So if you see the equilibrium price and the quantity change in the same direction, it will be a movement along the supply curve. It will be a demand curve shift. Right? If you see the equilibrium price and the quantity move in opposite direction, you know it's a movement along the demand curve, then it has to be the supply curve has shifted. Okay, that's the trick. That's the trick to understand or figure out exactly which curve have moved. And if we tell you, right, a curve have moved, either it be a supply curve or demand curve, you know how to figure out what the equilibrium quantity and the equilibrium price, how they will change, right? Here we have supply decrease, then the equilibrium price go up, but the equilibrium quantity go down. If supply increase, right, and the demand curve remain the same, we know that equilibrium price going down and the equilibrium quantity goes up. So we have seen the shift of one curve, right? One supply or demand curve shift its position. What if both curve shift, right? Both curve change their positions, and in this picture, what we see is basically the demand curve decline a little bit, right? Demand shifted to the left a bit, and the supply curve also shift to the left, but in a much larger magnitude. And basically what we see here is the quantity equilibrium quantity decreased, price increased. So basically the relative magnitude of the supply shift is much larger than the demand shift. And the result is basically you have something similar to a movement along the demand curve. Then if the supply increase, right, in this bottom picture, and the demand decrease, and a lot of people want to sell more for whatever the price is, but people don't want it anymore. and then you will have a tremendous drop in the price. The quantity change we don't really know. In this picture, we have a lower equilibrium quantity, but basically in this kind of situation, we can only tell, right, where the price will go, where the equilibrium price will go. The quantity really depends on the relative strength of the change in the supply and the demand. So let me show you some more concrete example for this. Let's say the supply and the demand curves move in the same direction. Here, what do I mean is that the supply decrease in this picture on the left, and the demand also decrease, right? Supply decrease, demand decrease. And what we are looking at is a new equilibrium from E1 to E2. The equilibrium quantity decrease a lot. The price, uh, actually, we in this picture we have lower price, slightly lower price, but you can certainly imagine if the supply decrease even further, right, the price can be higher. So in this situation, when both supply and demand decrease, we know for sure the equilibrium quantity will decrease, but the equilibrium price is basically uncertain. Okay, only when you have a picture, a concrete picture, you can tell where the equilibrium price has gone. But if you don't have a concrete picture, it's uncertain. Now here, for the picture on the right, right, we have demand increase, demand shift to the right, supply also increase, supply shift to the right as well. And what we know for sure is that the quantity supplied increased from Q1 to Q2, and the price actually dropped a little bit. But you can also imagine if the demand, right, increase a lot, that can actually drive up the second equilibrium price above the first equilibrium price. So again, when you have both supply and the demand increase, we know for sure the equilibrium quantity will increase, but equilibrium price change is uncertain. Really depends on the relative magnitude of the movement. Unless you know exactly how much each curve have moved, we don't know where the equilibrium price will be compared to the previous equilibrium price. However, basically, if the both demand and supply curve move in the same direction, we will know for sure for the equilibrium quantity change, either increase or decrease. Okay, that is a sure thing. We know, but the equilibrium price change is uncertain. If the supply and demand move in different direction at the same time, we will know for sure about the price movement, but the equilibrium quantity will be uncertain. So let's look at this. Here we have an increase in the supply and decrease in demand. Decrease in demand, the demand curve shift to the left, supply curve shift to the right, and price dropped a lot. Equilibrium quantity, here we have an increase, but you can imagine if the supply doesn't shift that much to the right, right, the equilibrium quantity can also decrease. In the picture on the right, we have an increase in demand, but a decrease in supply, and that drive up the price a lot. The equilibrium quantity here also increase, but you can imagine, right, if the supply curve, this S2 here, shift further to the left, you will have a new equilibrium quantity that is lower than the initial equilibrium quantity Q1. Okay, so again, to summarize, if the supply curve and the demand curve move in opposite direction, we will know for sure for the price movement either go up or go down. You probably need to draw a picture to help you to remember, right, exactly which direction the price will go. But what we know that is uncertain is the quantity. The equilibrium quantity change is uncertain. And now let's talk about how the government interventions can put the market out of equilibrium. Here we have a price ceiling P upper bar. And this ceiling price is lower than the equilibrium price, so it is so-called binding. Right? If the price ceiling is above this equilibrium price, the market will end up at the equilibrium. But if the price ceiling is below the equilibrium price, then it is actually a effective price ceiling, which means there will be some people who want to buy at this price, but the supply is not enough. Here we have this binding price ceiling, and the quantity demanded is Q1, which is higher than the quantity supplied, and that means there's excess demand, or say you have a shortage in the market. And then let's look at the price floor, right? Again, the price floor won't be binding if it is below the market equilibrium. And that's why, the government has been talking about raising the minimum wage in the past few years. They finally raised it a little bit because they are saying that the minimum wage is not binding. People actually find jobs that they pay them higher than the minimum wage. So they increase the minimum wage a little bit. But let's say the minimum wage is actually effective. It is actually binding. It has to be above the market equilibrium wage level. And then what you will have is basically a unemployment. That's excess supply of labor, right? The quantity supplied into the labor market is higher than quantity demanded. Firms at this minimum wage do not hire as many people as there are looking for a job. So there's uh, unemployment in the marketplace. This is the price floor. And then let's talk about the sales tax. In the textbook, it's called a specific tax, and it's kind of per unit tax. And one conclusion from these two pictures is that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who will pay the tax out of pocket. The sellers and buyers will both, right? As long as you have this supply and demand curves that have slopes, right? They are not vertical. Then both of them will share some of the tax burden. Okay, both of them will share some of the tax burden. In the picture on the left, we have after tax equilibrium at 215. It's basically the supplier, right? The sellers mark the price as 215, and the government take 55 cents away. They only receive 160. Okay, they only receive 160, and basically compare to the previous no tax equilibrium, the consumers paying 15 cents more, so the firms receive 40 cents less. And what we are looking at here is that this tax burden of 55 cents is shared between the buyers and the sellers. And obviously here the buyers have a lower share of the tax burden. But that depends on the relative slope of the supply and demand curve. In the picture on the right, what we have is basically the consumers actually pay out of pocket for this 55 cents tax. And what happens basically, the sellers mark the price at 160. And when the consumers pay, they pay 160 and see another 55 cents on their receipt for the tax. So effectively, the consumer is paying a total of $2.15 per unit. But still, compared to the previous equilibrium E1, right, the consumer is paying 15 cents for the 55 cents tax, and the sellers are paying 40 cents for the 55 cents tax. And that's, again, the conclusion is basically it doesn't matter which party is paying, right? Both parties will share some of the tax burden, and the proportion depends on the slope. Okay. Now, there are also different situations. If you have a vertical demand curve, it basically says whatever the price is, the quantity demanded won't change. Okay, you increase the price, the consumers, the buyers still want this 24 unit quantity. And then if there's a tax imposed, say on the sellers, right, the consumer will pay the whole thing. They will pay this complete. Now it's 25 cents per gallon federal excess tax on gasoline. Okay, so that's when you have a vertical demand curve. Consumers buy at whatever price, and then the tax burden will be fully shared or not shared, right? Fully take over by the consumers. However, if the supply curve, right, it's vertical. The supply curve is basically, all right, here's the supply. Here's the quantity we want to sell. And whatever price is, we have to sell it. In this situation, the tax will be completely borne by the sellers because if they want to sell for a higher price, the only thing they will get is basically the demand will decrease. Okay, and they end up, as long as they still want to sell this quantity, they end up taking lower price.